Hey, security peeps. We are live with another edition of Breaking into Cybersecurity. And this is an awesome one because it is the State of Inclusion edition. I am here with Lynn Dohm. Say hi to everybody, Lynn.
Hi, everyone.
And I'm Renee Small, cybersecurity super recruiter, helping awesome leaders hire great talent. So, we wanted to get together, and since happy Women's History Month, Lynn, since you're doing all the awesome things for women in cybersecurity, we wanted to get together today and talk about the state of inclusion. So we know that over the years, there has been more women coming into the cybersecurity field. But it's very interesting because I know WISIS puts out a white paper. Is it yearly that you all do this?
Well, we just piloted the first study in the beginning of 2023. So we haven't developed quite a cadence yet. We did a benchmark at the end of last year. So the anticipation is that we'll continue, or expectation is that we'll be doing it,
I think we'll want to hear like the evolution. So, where it was, and maybe in a couple years, like how we've been able to bring more women into the cybersecurity field. So before we get into that, folks, if you are, as you all know, we are streaming live on LinkedIn and YouTube. If you do come in, let us know where you're listening from, where you are tuning in from, and we are going to jump in and get started. And Lynn, I always do this with every guest. We ask, how did you get into the world of cybersecurity?
Well, that's a really good question. It was more like a stumble and fall upon cybersecurity, and then get really interested and curious about why we have this critical workforce shortage. So I started many years ago when I was contracted for a National Science Foundation grant called the National Centers for Systems Security and Information Assurance. And what we were working on at that time was many different training and development programs into the cybersecurity workforce. And so with that programming efforts, where I found a lot of different interest was that everyone that was involved in their cybersecurity skill development and learning and the training program were so just tuned and tapped into what they were doing. They were completely hyper-focused. They were super enthusiastic. They were energetic, just problem solving, troubleshooting, just really in the zone of what cybersecurity has to offer all of them. And to me, it was so fascinating that cybersecurity is everything. Like it's mission focused, it's curiosity, it's problem solving, it's multitasking, and it's really leveling up your curiosity and having it lead you to places. But yet we're at this critical workforce shortage. And so that was really the area that I rested in when I started working with cybersecurity, is why this critical workforce shortage. And I moved around. I worked with many different grant funded projects, many different nonprofits, some for-profits along the way. And then I came across WSIS, and I worked in a support capacity with WSIS since 2015. And in 2018, it was when I attended my first conference. And at that, I myself was a participant that experienced the power of the WSIS organization, Women in Cybersecurity, being at my own first conference here in the Chicagoland area in 2018. And my career advanced very quickly that year. And the following year, in 2019, I was asked if I would consider applying for the executive director role. And that's how I came into this position right here. So, I mean, how amazing that I was able to merge my passion and my career into one, location within the WSIS organization. And it's definitely a place that I'm so passionate about and love being in.
What an awesome career progression. I always, anytime anyone is on and I just love learning about where people, like how people started in their careers and where they are today. And it's always so interesting and fascinating hearing it. And in yours, how you've gotten into, grown into the role that you're in as executive director and doing such pivotal work in this space. So
thank you.
it's awesome. Awesome. So let's jump into the the state of inclusion. And I guess the first question I would start out with is, what does it mean to be inclusive? Like, what is, people hear about diversity and inclusion, and even you and I chatted prior to this about belonging, so what would you say, if someone says, I don't even fully understand what this is?
Yeah.
How would you describe it?
Well, first of all, our chit chat before the actual podcast, they could have been a podcast, Renee. I enjoyed that so much. We had such a great
I agree.
5 seconds and all. Yeah, and so, what kind of led us on this place also as a WESIS organization? Our mission is to recruit, retain, and advance women in cybersecurity. But we're at this place where, all right, women represented now, since 2019. Now we have roughly 20 to 24% of the workforce. That data has been sticking around for quite some time, and we saw the needle move ever so slightly since 2014 when it was at that 11%. But now we're at that roughly 20-24%. We know we could recruit all we want, but what about our mission and focus on retention and career advancement opportunities? And that's what led us on this path of what is the retention for women in cybersecurity? I mean, the work that we're doing, we're always putting the ownership and the responsibility for the underrepresented individual himself or herself to educate and advocate for themselves. And how could we kind of put some metrics around kind of the employer responsibility part of that retention piece as well, and career growth and advancement. And so it was really interesting for us to partner and work with Illyria Research and really dissect and dig in a little bit deeper about what is inclusion for women in cybersecurity. And that's what led us on the journey to pilot the study at the beginning of 2023 and then provide the benchmark assessment at the end of 2023, is because we wanted to gain a better understanding. So we know that diversity sometimes, in some instances, the word diversity, because it's a metric and a point that you can measure, sometimes that term gets thrown around. What is the diversity? It's a metric you can measure. You can measure it 1 year and measure it again next year. And if it grows ever so slightly, everyone could feel good about their initiatives that they're putting in the organization. But inclusion is so complicated. And inclusion, it's not that data point. It's not that easy to obtain data point, because inclusion is a feeling, and it's how you feel when you're excluded that you have this awareness of what actually inclusion and exclusion is. And so we realized if we wanted employers to have more interest or more awareness on the state of inclusion for underrepresented individuals within their organizations, we needed to have data. So by partnering with Illyria, we were able to quantify the experiences of exclusion to identify the state of inclusion for women in cybersecurity. And that's what led us on this journey, is similar to cybersecurity, how cybersecurity is always working and it's always silent until it's not, and then you hear about it. Inclusion is the same until you're excluded and then you realize it. Or like how you don't feel your body when you feel good. You just feel in a really wonderful, energetic, vibrant state until you have pain. And then all of a sudden you're feeling your body. Then you're paying attention to it. That's like inclusion. You're not paying attention to inclusion when you're included, but you certainly have it on your radar when you're excluded. And so that's why we're kind of like shifting it, bringing in inclusion before diversity, knowing that the lack of diversity is a symptom of the lack of inclusion. And then we're bringing that forward with some data in our conversations about inclusion. So that's kind of what led us here on this journey and into the conversation of, the importance of inclusion.
Right. I thought there were so many nuggets that when you and I, like I said, before we even got on the podcast, the pre-talk, that maybe we had some, I know you laughed at a story that I had around retention. So first, let's, break down some of the things that you said in regards to why you could, why you started doing the study, where you are now with this, at the point where we are with the study. And saying in this one, when you said it, it was like ding, 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 because you said to me, we could recruit people in all day long. It's the retention that's the challenge. And I have seen that and I experienced that firsthand. And I was sharing with you that a few years ago, when we started breaking into cybersecurity, and a lot of people don't know this, that or at this stage, because it's been years that have passed, we started it because so many, mostly early career talent, reached out to me and reached out to Chris, and they would say, can you help us find jobs? And it was a bit mind-boggling to me, because I was the has had this recruitment company trying desperately to find this seasoned cybersecurity talent. So it's like, on the one hand, you're looking for this talent that's so hard to find in the marketplace, and on the other hand, there's this big group of what seems to be all of these budding cybersecurity professionals with degrees in hand, coming out of school, certifications, degrees, and can't get jobs. And we couldn't understand what was happening. Fast forward to talking about retention. So when getting in, so then they finally break in, and then, to your point, they don't stay. And it's like, what's happening here? Like, we did all this work to try to get you into this role, and then they may turn over. And I was sharing with Lynn that there was I remember this roundtable vividly, and had leaders of many different large organizations, and one in particular, it wasn't in a roundtable, but it was a different like conversation, but large retail organization. If I named it, everybody's shop there. And and I'd said to this person, I did some research, in I did some quick research on LinkedIn, and I see that all of these people, and there were at least, it feels like the number, and I don't want to exaggerate it, but but they employ so many people. It easily could probably have been this. It felt like the number was in the maybe 80-ish people on LinkedIn that worked at this organization that also had cybersecurity degrees, but they were underemployed. So they were working as like, stock people and, cashiers or whatever. But they had these degrees, and I brought it to the person's attention, and I said, you have all this internal talent that's right here, and they're looking, and, they could move into these roles. And they said, we recruit from, this place. And it's like, your internal talent is there. So that was one aspect of it. So that was like the internal recruitment. But then when folks would leave, I'm mixing the stories up. One of the stories, the guy said to me, we'll just get new ones. Like, we'll just recruit. And so it was mind-boggling to me. Mind-boggling. I was like, what? So they just go back out there and recruit new people, and it's a constant turnover every couple of months, or every 1.5 years or so. And then we end up in a position where we're in now.
Right. And that's coming out of, like, retention ultimately comes out of that recruiting dollars. And so when you could effectively retain and advance women and underrepresented into their careers and throughout their careers, your productivity is going to go up. Your costs of recruiting is going to go down. Your reputation is going to go up. You're creating an inclusive space, an employer that, individuals want to grow and stay with. That reputation goes up. I mean, there's so many things that are of benefit, but yet there are so many studies that continue to show stories just like yours, is that inclusion and retention is not a priority on many different leaders' radar. And so that's why it was important for us to have this data. And so the piloted study at the beginning of 2023 showed something that we expected, is that the highest sources of exclusion for women in cybersecurity came from respect, the lack of respect. And that aligns with many, many different industries. That's exactly what we expected. But what we didn't expect, and that was very interesting, is that 57% of women that said their secondary source of exclusion came from the lack of came from the lack of career growth and advancement opportunities. And that also aligned with another finding of this study is that women are experiencing a glass ceiling at around 6 years within an organization. So there's some data. There's some data that everyone should be listening and paying attention to. And we have that executive summary from the 2023 report on our website. But that information is really, really important to note because now we have initiatives and areas of focus instead of just throwing out all sorts of different initiatives and hoping that something sticks for the retention factor. That now we have very specific guidelines here that we're willing, that we have to share with others. And if you're looking at being very intentional with the initiatives in your area of focus, and if this is a priority to you, then this might be the WISA State of Inclusion report might just be the launching pad for you to explore more and have it be a part of your inclusion journey and retention journey.
Right. And Lynn, when the respect, growth, and the glass ceiling at 6 years, it's so interesting because speaking to people on the ground, it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
And it's sad.
Yeah.
Right? That it's not surprising. The growth part in particular is every survey that's out there talks about why people leave, why people turn over and stuff in companies. If you look at the various reports, growth, training and development, especially being in an industry where it's ever changing. That's one of the number one. It's either number one or number two, most often than not. So that part doesn't surprise you. When you hear from women or talk to women and he's talking about, the level of respect, that doesn't surprise me. The glass ceiling at 6 years, when it's just like you're right on the cusp of like that leadership now, you've been in your role and you're getting that kind of pushback and stuff. It's what we hear anecdotally. So
Right.
it's interesting that the data is now showing this.
Yes. And the good news is that people are paying attention. So that's the really good news, is that employers are paying attention. They're looking at the data, they're having the conversations. And that's why we wanted to produce the data, is because to have those metrics was really important for us to open up to having more conversations. Because prior to doing the state of inclusion assessment, it was just hearsay. It was anecdotally what we were hearing from others, inadequate career advancement opportunities or inadequate training and resources, the lack of resources, the lack of awareness, not having a clear trajectory of where they are in their current existing role and what does that look like moving forward in the future. I mean, all of this was things that we reported we were hearing from our community, as are you, Renee. But now we're able to have those quantified data out there in the report. And so the benchmark assessment actually will be coming out next week. So that's the larger scale benchmark that we did in 2023. And so that data will be coming out and will be available next week, even on our website. So it's an opportunity for employers and individuals to even learn more.
That's great. It's good to know that this information is going to be put out there. And you said you're getting really good feedback from the leaders. So I'm curious to hear more about what they're saying when they see this data. Is it surprising to them? Is it something that they, how have you gotten a lot of feedback yet in regards to what kinds of steps they, some of the leaders that are doing a really good job at this, what they plan to do with this data?
Yes, and we have. And that's really important to note, is that not only is everyone really interested in the data, they're concerned about it, they're paying attention to it, and they're asking what else. And so we have many different resources available on our website but also Illyria, our researcher, has this inclusion calculator that really estimates the costs that that companies or organizations are losing by not prioritizing initiatives like inclusion and retention. And so that, when it's calculated into like financial loss, that really speaks volumes when it comes to people focusing on these initiatives very intently. And so when there's opportunities for employers to have their own state of inclusion assessment done, there's opportunities for employers to pull the resources that we have, like inclusive leadership, how to be an ally for women in cybersecurity, how to recruit women in cybersecurity, inclusive mentoring, all those are readily available. Inclusive language, that's also very important. And so that's on our website and also in many other places. But employers are really doing intentional actions now by having this conversation a lot more thoughtfully, where prior to having a report and data and metrics, it was more of, well, what should we do? We don't really know what to do. And now it's like very intentional. We know career growth and advancement is the major source of exclusion. We know that women are experiencing a glass ceiling at around 6 years with an organization. So if you value your teams, you would pay attention to where they're at in their career and where they're at within the organization. And if they're at that 4 or 5 year mark, you would really start making sure that you know exactly what kind of career growth and advancement opportunities they have within that company. And you, the direct report or the direct manager, or as a leader, you would ensure that that is part of those touch points with that individual, and you're moving them forward in the path that is, that is on the path and the journey for all involved.
Right. Right. So the leaders those are some really good takeaways, because it's not difficult, to do some of the things to ensure that this population and women, obviously, but all people coming into the workforce feel included, feel one of what you just said, what you said earlier about knowing that they're not excluded, and feel that inclusion, and that, it goes across the board. And we've had so many different people come on, neurodiverse, all of these various components, and really truly ensuring that people feel that way, and taking those steps. So I like the idea of it, that 4 or 5 year mark, like, that's the area where you have to kind of, scaffold, like they say in teaching, to make sure that if you see women in your organization that need this additional support, this is where the struggle might really start to ratchet up, and providing that support system. Have you seen organizations, I know of years ago when, and still today, organizations come up with the, what do they call it? Is it called ENGs? ESG? I forget the actual term, but those groups, like
the resource groups,
the like resource ERGs, yeah. Resource groups.
Yes.
Have you seen anyone doing that in this, like, kind of niche, like a sub niche of something? Because I know they have, like, I remember when I was working, they would have like a mom's group, they had a group of the sandwich generation, where you're taking care of your parents and you're taking care of your children. That was a group. And then you had you might have, there were all these different types of groups. There was obviously a women's group, and then African American group, and a Latino group, like all these different ones, and I think Asian American, all of that. So I'm just curious to hear if you've heard of any orgs that may have had like subgroups, that they might be standing up.
Yes. And actually, I get invited to a lot of those
Oh, good.
resource groups. Yes, it's been wonderful. Especially during Women's History Month. So I do spend a lot of time with those resource groups as they invite me over to just talk about the state of inclusion, what that means, and kind of brainstorm some ideas. So it's been really valuable. I see a high uptick in participation in those resource groups. Even in the past 4.5 years that I've been as executive director, I just see more and more engagement and awareness and more kind of thought-provoking conversations within those resource groups. And what's great is those resource groups are not just hosting, see, like WESIS, we're not a women's only organization. We're a community concerned about the critical workforce shortage. We're at a critical workforce shortage. And we also know that our mission is to recruit, retain, and advance women in cybersecurity. We exist because we're a workforce shortage. And so everyone that's a part of our organization has that on their radar. They're concerned about the security of themselves, their families, the companies they work for, the communities they belong to. So therefore, you know that in order to have diversity, you need to have the pipeline. In order to have the pipeline, you need to tap into diverse communities. So our mission stands very strong and tried and true with them. And so that's why they support us. And so, well, within these resource groups, what I'm also seeing is that even if it is a women's resource group, what they're doing is they're hosting an event on the WESIS State of Inclusion, or Women in Cybersecurity Inclusion, or a Women's Security Resource Group is hosting this type of conversation. They're inviting everyone to participate in, because we know the importance of allies in the space. And Renee, I know we touched a little bit about that too. And allyship is really, really critical. We're not doing this alone. We're doing this in response to the critical workforce shortage we have. And so we're all responsible for leveling up one another and bringing that skills, into the workforce. And so what I like to see, and what I've seen so much more in the past year and a half, is so many individuals are involved in leadership from other departments, and that are just curious, or they want to learn more, and they come into that conversation. So we're creating this really safe, space for individuals to come and connect and ask questions and learn more. And that's what we want. And it's education. It's an educational process. Just like how we speak about allyship. Allyship is very courageous. It takes a lot of bravery. It's easier to walk away. You're putting yourself in an uncomfortable and perhaps a very vulnerable position when you're an ally, when you're interrupting an interrupter. That could be something that would make an individual uncomfortable, but it takes courage. And once you start doing it and start practicing it, you see the movement going stronger. You see that you're making, progress with being an ally, and really seeing a shift and a change that's necessary. And that's the reason why we have all these important conversations. That's the reason why you do the good work you do, Renee, is to have these educational pivotal points for many to come in, learn a little bit of information, and them being the individual mobilizing it to take a step further.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you. I mean, you're doing some amazing work. And it's so true. There's so many, I'm also thinking about, and I don't know if you want to tell the story about the young lady that you talked about with the school, being in an inclusion situation in her school, and having that. And we were talking about the allies and saying how the ally component is so very important. And I wonder if it makes sense. Like I think sometimes, we're in when I say we, security professionals as a whole could be in a bubble, right? So, and I think it may be the case with all professionals, right? Like you do your job for X amount of hours a day, and then afterwards you're researching in relation to the job, and then you have your life, right? So it's not like you're going to be looking over, oh, what are they doing in marketing, or what are they doing in HR, in these other places, or, oh, I'm a mom, what is that dad's group saying? But it may make sense to your point with the allyship component and the education component for, the leaders of organizations to be sharing with their other leaders, because at the end of the day, you're supporting the whole organization. So to your point where you said cybersecurity touches everyone, it does. It touches our homes, our lives, our, everything. So everyone is kind of like a cyber professional in their organization. It's just that the folks that are in security, that's their, their subject matter expertise, but it touches the whole entire organization. So it'd be interesting to see how this report, it's cool to hear that you're doing this, you're being invited in, and then you're talking to people outside of security about this topic.
Yeah. And it really, and when we were catching up a little bit ago, we were sharing some stories that what we all heard. But I did a keynote last September when I was out in Vegas at a security conference, and it was really interesting to me when I was reporting on the state of inclusion and some data, and I was sharing some stories. I have lots of stories.
I love the stories. The stories is what makes it really like this is actually happening. This has happened.
This is happening. And after the keynote, a woman came up to me and she was bawling her eyes out. And she was like, that hit me to my core. She said that her team goes out when they do every team event. It's always at a stadium or it's always at a ballpark, like it's some like sporting event. And that's not the issue. The issue is that because she has a certain level of disability, she's a woman of size. And so she cannot climb those stadium stairs. She cannot, be able to kind of have the same experience that others are having at this big team event that they're always having. This is how the teams all get together. And she said that wasn't the most upsetting thing about her, is that she respectfully declines all these team events, of team building events. She declines them. But again, that's not what was so upsetting about it. What was upsetting is that nobody noticed. Nobody ever paid attention. Nobody was ever looking at, gee, I noticed so-and-so is never able to attend these different events. Maybe we should have a conversation with her. At the WISIS conference, we had an allyship panel last year, and it was amazing. We had like 300 individuals in this room. We had a panel up there, and there were security professionals, really, senior security professionals that are really advancing in their careers. And they were sharing some stories about, this one woman in particular, when she was at the beginning of her career, she was on a team with 95 men. 95 is on her team. And every day they all went out to lunch and they all did things together. And every day they walked past her desk. And when she was on the panel, and, that's a very emotional stories to bring out, that treasury of, what you went through at that time. But her one thing that stuck out to me was she said, did any one of those 95 men think that I don't eat lunch? Or that maybe I would be interested in going out to lunch? Like, do you think I don't eat? These are like the simple little things. And that's why it's important to story tell and to share the stories. I mean, on our inclusion assessment, we have so many. And, some of them are that, as part of the leadership team, we come up with team events, and being the only woman on the leadership team, it's assumed that the woman would be the one that would coordinate the actual event, that they would be the event coordinator. Or no, she was part of the leadership that brainstormed the idea for the particular events, not necessarily coordinator. All these stories and so much more. I know, Renee, you shared a couple yourself that, you've heard along the way. Managers putting the new hire headshot on a slide deck and labeling it diversity hire. Like that just happened not so long ago. Like, this is perpetuating the problem, and just having this conscious awareness of this exists, and being aware of conscious and unconscious bias, and how that might impact others on how they are being included in team activities is very important.
Unbelievable. I'm speechless. I don't know why I'm speechless. I really don't, but but I am. Wow. Diversity hire.
Diversity hire. And she saw the slide deck, mind you. And she saw her headshot with the label diversity hire. So, and isn't that a common also misconception? We haven't, even in our state of inclusion assessment, we're able to share it with permission. And when I was promoted to a level C or a level 6 as chief engineer, male colleagues talked behind my back saying that I only got the position because I was a woman. I mean, so we're even getting it in the most recent data that we pulled from many different areas. So,
And this is the newest study that's coming out in 2 weeks.
yes.
These are
Yes.
some of the anecdotes.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Lynn, this has been a fabulous conversation, sharing some of the amazing work that you all have been doing, and just highlighting again when the stories are what really touches, it hits you to the core, because you see yourself, like this lady who nobody asked her to come out for lunch.
Yeah.
And you and I talked a little bit about this, but sometimes, and I get it, as an introvert, like we talked a little bit about this part, like, why didn't she say, well, where are all you guys going? I want to um come. And why wasn't she the one, like, speak up for yourself or say this? And we put it on, and it goes back to what you said the very beginning. We tend to put the onus on a lot of these things. And granted, maybe the 95 guys were all there and they're hungry. They're heading out the door. They're not even remotely thinking about who's coming, who's not, or whatever. But we chatted a little bit about the fact that you have folks that are introverts, you have folks that are not going to be. We put the onus on the individual that is the person who, we put the onus on them to speak up versus the other folks.
Right.
So
And that's why we're trying, and that's why I really appreciate you having these conversations and being a part of so many of these
yeah,
conversations, is because we're trying to also flip the conversation a little bit too, about just paying attention
right.
and really understanding about that, because the education and the advocating, and we have 1,600 enrolled in our mentor mentee program. We have those resources even in our own mentor mentee program on communication skills, leadership skills, presentation skills, negotiation, all of that. We have all that in our own programming effort. However, that's very important, and it's also very important to have the diverse perspectives of what would be creating an inclusive space look like for others too. And so it's always, a balancing act, and it's important for people to have this awareness on all sides, to and then to have the resources available and accessible, so when a moment of allyship is presented in front of you, you're ready to go ahead and be the ally that stands in that space and drives the change that's needed.
You're prepared. It's
And
all
it's
about
women and
preparation.
men and non-binary individuals showing up as allies. There's studies that show
Right.
that women and men, 9 out of 10 women and men, are biased against women in the workplace. So it goes layers, Renee. It goes layers. This is
Goodness
not,
gracious.
this is all hands on deck. This is everyone's responsibility. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Wow. Well, Lynn, thank you again. We're a little over the 30-minute mark. And I appreciate you coming on and sharing this study. And, definitely come back when it drops in a couple weeks. We want to be able to put it out there and share it so that we can continue to have these types of conversations. Is there anything else that you wanted to say? Final words before we wrap up?
No, this is it. Just thank you for having me, and thank you for being a part of the WESIS organization and continuing to bring this conversation forward. I really appreciate it. The whole community appreciates your good work and all that you're doing.
Thank you. WESIS is an amazing organization. I always say WISIS. WESIS is an amazing organization. So I'm glad. I'm so excited. I was so excited to have you come and chat with us, and so that we can learn more about all the amazing work that you've been doing. So thank you again, Lynn, for being here. Security peeps, we are back again tomorrow. We have an awesome woman. I'm trying to wrap up with Women's History Month by bringing on phenomenal women in the field. So we have another, I'm not even going to tell you who, but we have another awesome woman coming on tomorrow afternoon. So I look forward to us having a conversation with her tomorrow. Thank you again, Lynn, for being here. And everyone have a great day.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.